Hello and welcome to the Captain's Table. This is David Benezra and I am your host. The Captain's Table features interesting guests from the world of sports, both amateur and professional. Our guest today will be the head coach of the Iowa Hawkeyes men's basketball team, Fran McCaffery. Now I want to give you a little coaching background. Fran began his college coaching career at Penn and then went to Lehigh. At 26 years of age, he became the youngest head coach in college basketball when he was promoted in 1985 at Lehigh, where he stayed until 1988 when he took an assistant's position at Notre Dame under John McLeod. He was there until 1999. He took the head coaching job at UNC Greensboro, where he led them to their first NC2A tourney appearance. He then took the coaching position at Siena in 2005. Siena had been 6-24 the year before he arrived. He would go on to lead Siena to 4 21 seasons and 3 consecutive NC2A tourney appearances and notched first-round upsets over Vanderbilt and Ohio State. He was then named the head coach at Iowa in 2010. Now, some notes on his background, his record. He became Iowa's all-time winningest coach last season and also holds the Iowa coaching record for most Big Ten victories. 42 years as a collegiate coach, 28 years as a head coach, 23 winning seasons. 17 postseason appearances, including 12 NC2A bids, 14 20-win seasons, 6 conference tournament champions, in leading teams to conference tournament titles from 4 or more different leagues. He is also part of an exclusive club that features Rick Pitino, Bobby Huggins, Eddie Sutton, and Lefty Drizel. Pretty elite company. He recorded his 500th win as a collegiate head coach back on December 8th of 2022, and currently has a career coaching record of 531 and 368 for a 591 winning percentage, which is actually more impressive considering that he started out at Lehigh, UNC Greensboro, which had never made the tournament until he became their head coach, and Siena, who, as I mentioned, was 6-24 the year before he was hired. To me, that sounds more like a 65% winning percentage once he gets someplace and has the chance to get it going. At Iowa, they've won 20 or more games 12 times in the last 18 years, and he has led them to NC2A tournament berths in 7 of the last 10 years. In the last 5 seasons, Iowa has won 21 games over top 25 opponents, and I think that's plenty of stats. That's probably all the stats anybody can handle, but I think we had to get that out there because I don't think, you're not in a media center like New York or Los Angeles. I think a lot of people, they know your name, but they really don't know everything. So, finally, a question. So, obviously, I'm assuming you thought about and tried to plan everything, but while taking the assistant job at Notre Dame, under a coach who had been successful at both the collegiate and pro level, had to still be a little difficult since you had already been a head coach, and due to your youth, had to be an intriguing candidate for another head coaching job. Can you go back and enlighten me about that whole process?
Well, first of all, David, it's a pleasure to be with you. I consider you one of my favorite people in this profession. We met many years ago when I was an assistant at Notre Dame. I can remember those days very well. And just for clarification, when I went to Notre Dame, I actually went to work for Digger Phelps.
Thank you for that.
Okay. I worked for Digger for 3 years. He hired me. Forever grateful. Really unique person in a lot of different ways, but taught me so much about running a program. He was one of the most incredible people in terms of attention to detail that I've ever been around. And I learned so much from him. We've stayed close till this day. He calls me every Tuesday, tells me that he lit a candle for my son Patrick at the Grotto, praying for him to stay healthy. And he started doing that ever since Patrick was diagnosed with cancer at age 14. So that tells you the kind of person that Digger is. And I was involved in some head coaching searches in 1988. We had a really good run at Lehigh, and I interviewed at SMU, I interviewed at UMass, and was a finalist at both places. And, John Calipari got UMass, and John Shoemate was hired at SMU. So when that opening appeared on Coach Phelps' staff, I called and told him I would be interested in making that move. And, I think a lot of people felt it was a strange move at the time, but I think you, being in the business as long as you have been, understand it's a completely different experience. So in my first year, I'm preparing scouting reports to play Mike Krzyzewski, Denny Crum, Dean Smith, Bobby Knight, and we're playing. Remember, we played Kentucky at the old Hoosier Dome, they called it then, and we had 38,000 people at the game. It was just a completely different experience, and quite frankly, learning opportunity from one of the greats. And then, of course, I was very fortunate to have been retained by Coach McLeod, worked for him for 8 years. And as you pointed out, he had incredible success both at the collegiate and the professional level. So I worked for two legends, and quite honestly, two guys, Dave, who were completely different in their approach. And one thing Coach McLeod always said, he said, there's different ways to do this. And he, of course, over time was very, direct in his approach to teach and coach. He was not a screamer. He was not a yeller. Practices were teaching sessions. Digger was a little more motivational, but we prepared pretty much the same way, incredibly thorough, watched a lot of film and put very, very thorough scouting reports in front of our players and give them the best opportunity to win. So I can tell you, Dave, I was truly blessed to have had that opportunity to work for both of those guys for 11 years.
Yeah, from the outside looking in, that's like the yin and the yang, because what Digger projected to people that were not around all the time to see everything was a sort of arrogant, brash, flamboyant showman wearing the weird jackets to games and all that type of thing, and revving up the crowd, like you said, highly motivational, and playing a multitude of defenses. I mean, my God, how many different defenses in one game would he switch to? And here's Coach McLeod, who my impression is just, I would just say, gentleman. From any era, he just has that old, but in a good way, old gentleman quality to him. Like, somebody you give the keys to your house, to your anything you could just trust him with. He's that type of a guy. He engenders that. So interesting. Now, talking about that for two guys, 11 years. Now, staying at Notre Dame for 11 years, that would be something I would say that would be practically unheard of now, where it seems coaches are itching to move up every 2 to 3 years. Would you say that, not in a mercenary way, but did you get what you wanted out of being at Notre Dame pretty much in all aspects as far as moving on to be a head coach?
I really enjoyed my time there. I took great pride in representing that institution. As I pointed out, I learned an incredible amount. Digger was so incredibly thorough in everything that we did. And he was tough on the players, but he would do anything for the players. And so, I was blessed. He retired, if you remember, in my third year. He retired in 1990. And, we didn't really expect that. So I wasn't really looking for a job. Was enjoying working there. As I said, took great pride. And so he retires, and now I'm hoping to stay on with Coach McLeod. And he was very thorough in how he went through the process of getting to know me. I mean, he didn't hire me right away. He didn't fire me right away. He gave me an opportunity to show him how I would work and how I would support him and how I would help him navigate coming from the pros. He left coaching the New York Knicks to come to Notre Dame. So he was in college at Oklahoma 18 years earlier, but things changed quite a bit. So I took great pride in helping him in that transition, and then loved working for him and coming to work every day. So again, I wasn't looking for jobs, but I did engage in a couple. One of them, ironically, Dave, was the Siena job in '97, and when they hired Paul Hewitt. So when the job opened again in 2005, they contacted me because they were familiar with me because I had interviewed for the job previously and knew a lot of the people up there. So the other thing that's probably the most important, it's where I met my wife, Margaret. She was on Coach McGraw's staff. She played there, and then she ultimately attended law school at the University of Notre Dame. So she's what they call a double domer, undergrad and graduate. She was Muffet McGraw's first recruit at Notre Dame. And So we met there and eventually got married and had, 4 beautiful children.
It is a small world after all, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, that's great. I was going to ask you how you met your wife, so you answered that. At some point, though, even though you just answered the question about staying at Notre Dame, are you thinking after, say, 3 years under Digger, 3 or 4 years under Coach McLeod, that, okay, I'm not antsy. I like it. I like it here. I love it here. Coach McLeod's great to work for, but, you're still young, but are you starting to really look around, talk to people, network, think about it? Or, like you said, was it just that you were content and then you had talked to Siena and it came open and right away you went back to Siena?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was not itching, I would say, to answer that specific part of your question, to be a head coach. I took great pride in my job at Notre Dame and felt a responsibility to help coach try to build something, and when I ended up leaving, was very proud of the fact that we had, Troy Murphy and Harold Swanigan and David Graves and Matt Carroll and Martin Inglesby. I mean, you just look at that group and that they ended up winning the Big East Championship. So I was very proud of that group that we recruited. Also recruited Pat Garrity. So, Troy was the player of the year twice. Pat was a player of the year twice in that league. So the opportunities for me were going to be unique and specific. I was not going to search the internet for every Division I job that opened and say, okay, I got to go get one. And I was very lucky in my exploration of the job at UNC Greensboro. It's a fabulous place to live. It's a basketball state. And I worked for a tremendous person in Nelson Bob, who really supported me and our program. The best player, one of the top 2 players anyway, would be Courtney Eldridge or Kyle Hines that I coached there. And Courtney's on my staff right now. So he was my point guard for 3 years, and consider him like family. And that's what this business is all about. So it's just a blessing to have that opportunity to have explored coaching in the South. I've coached in the Midwest, as you pointed out. I coached in the East, and now I'm back in the Midwest. But now, as you know, the leagues are bi-coastal, so we're embarking on a completely unique time in college basketball.
That's a nice word for it, bi-coastal. I'm glad you used that word, and you should. On my end, I would use another word, but I'm not going to say that over this podcast. I still enjoy college basketball, but boy, they are stretching it a little bit for me. Okay, well, we're going to take a break here. We'll take a short commercial break, and then the Captain's Table will be right back with head coach Fran McCaffery of the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Fans of The Andy Griffith Show are raving about a brand new streaming series.
Chris Stone, what are you doing back here in Mayberry?
Your neighbors know they're living next door to a famous movie star yet?
He hasn't answered any of my calls.
That girl's headed right for Heartbreak Alley.
An old-fashioned love story in a modern-day Mayberry.
Yes!
A streaming series for the whole family.
Who's the only TV character named after 2 insects? And bee, of course.
Grandma's cat ate all the laxatives, and, well, we've got ourselves a situation.
Crazy, right?
Don't take any wooden nickels. Wooden nickels. That's a good one.
Those low-down, dirty buzzards.
It's an honor to be here. In fact, at my age, it's an honor to be anywhere.
It's a Christmas miracle.
Bravissimo.
We don't know what you're missing.
Mayberry Man, the series, now available on Prime Video.
These people are living in another world.
Hi, this is David Benezra, and I am back with Iowa head coach Fran McCaffery. So before I go on to Iowa, one thing about Siena. Now, it could have been you yourself who told me this. I don't know, but I guess Siena, in a way, was sort of like a hidden little jewel waiting to be polished. Supposedly they have good support. They get good attendance. I guess it's the downtown arena that they used to play at. I don't know if that's still the case. And you did really well there. Obviously able to recruit better talent than they had and get everybody excited about it. So that had to be a lot of fun, that particular job.
It was an incredible amount of fun, David. And to tell you the truth, I really felt like this is where I'm going to stay for the rest of my career at that time. We had a fabulous president and Father Mullen. We had a terrific AD, John Dargenio, who is still there. And I couldn't imagine a better coaching experience. It's a beautiful campus in a beautiful part of the capital city of the state of New York. And there was history there. Like if you go back to the 50s, they had really good teams. Now, they didn't go Division I until the mid-70s. John Griffin took over, had some really successful teams there. Then, of course, they had Mike Dean had some great teams there. He ended up going to Marquette. Paul Hewitt had a great run there. He ended up going to Georgia Tech. And so there was a history of really good teams, really good players. And as a result, an incredible fan base. So they sort of outgrew their on-campus facility. I mean, it was I coached there as an opponent, one of the hardest places to play in college basketball. You know, just kind of an oversized high school gym, essentially, but right on campus.
What we used to call like a bandbox almost then.
Yeah, it was. And so what happened in Albany, David, they built a downtown arena for the city, but it was essentially for the old Albany Patroons in the CBA. The CBA was thriving in that city. So now you have an NBA arena in a nice sized city, but you can also bring in, you know, Bruce Springsteen or the circus or Disney on Ice. I mean, those kinds of things. And it really developed a vibrant downtown with restaurants and things like that. And of course, a lot of state employees because it was the capital of the state of New York. And so it was a big decision in '97 to take Siena downtown to play in a 15,000 seat arena when there's only 2,900 students that go to that school. So what happened was the fan base had already been engaged, and now they're even more engaged. So you had legitimate season ticket holders, basketball fans that didn't necessarily go to Siena, were supporting our teams. We had great crowds and dwarfed everybody else in the conference. But also, where they were located was unique, sort of equidistant from New York and Boston, but far enough away from both of those cities. So we had our own TV stations, our own newspapers. And so that program was covered by the media essentially the same way that any Power 5 school was covered. So there was no better experience for me to prepare for the Big Ten than to be at Siena. You know, I had my own radio show, my own TV show. You know, we had a ton of newspapers that followed us religiously, and we're really a prominent part of that community. And so the players were really popular, and we had a great run, like you said. So I was blessed to be there. They did everything they could to help us be successful. And when you're in a situation like that, it's a blessing because, as you know a lot of coaches, David, that aren't in that position. You know, you have administrations that want to help, but they just don't have the resources or they don't have the personnel that can help you be successful like you want to be. Well, they did everything they could there. And we were going to win and continue to win. But I felt like an opportunity to coach at the Big Ten level, at the Power 5 level, with the incredible history of success and coaching and players at the University of Iowa was an opportunity I couldn't pass up.
Well, I think all that speaks to your character. Not that there's anything wrong with wanting to go to a bigger place, but, you know, I would say every coach on the planet would look at Siena, and while they might like it, it's obviously for them it's a stepping stone job. I mean, heck, even when I talked to Rick Barnes years ago, and he loved his experience at Providence, in describing Providence, he said Providence is a great stepping stone job. And here you were saying, hey, things are great. You know, I mean, if something happens to drop in my lap, yeah, but I don't need to be actively looking to go somewhere. I've got great people. I've got all these things going. Life is good. It's more than just having the, you know, Kentucky behind my name or Louisville or whoever it happens to be. So I think that's interesting. Now, we touched on this briefly, but I would say now that we're getting to Iowa, you must love a lot of things about coaching at Iowa. And knowing a little about you, I was going to guess it was a people thing. It's a great place to raise your family because, you know, obviously your kids were young. And just a high level of comfort would be the word that you probably found there. So I'm going to combine that, which is, there's not really a question, that was more of a comment, but combine that with, did you ever think, not just Iowa, but just in general, that you would be coaching some 500 plus wins later? Did you ever look at it and think, I mean, maybe you thought you were a lifer, but still, that's a long time.
Yeah, I would agree with you. When I got into this business, I had hoped I would be a lifer. And as you know, you never can predict where that journey is going to take you. And I think in some ways, it's the beauty of this profession and the game itself, but it's also a little bit disconcerting because you mentioned a minute ago, my family, my boys and my daughter were young. So, we wake them up and tell them, hey, we're moving to Iowa, and they're like,
where is that? How do you spell that?
Exactly. Three of them burst into tears. And the only thing, now we did move from Greensboro to Albany, but they were really young then. So they were in love with their friends. We had a beautiful home. They loved the teams they were on. They loved the schools they were attending. Why are we doing this? And so a lot of thought, as you can imagine, went into that. My wife, Margaret's best friend in the world, her roommate from her days at Notre Dame, she earned her PhD in mathematics at the University of Iowa. So she and her husband lived here for a while. And she just could not have been more glowing in her praise of what it was like to live here. And it's kind of what we suspected, but it's also nice to have someone affirm that and talk about it. And she said, of all the places we've lived, and they had moved around, she said that would be my favorite place to live. You will love it there. Her family is from St. Paul, Minnesota, so that's 4 hours north. So we were much closer to her family than we ever were. Obviously, Greensboro and Albany were far from St. Paul, so her parents could drive down, her sisters, and
I'll bet a lot of people in Iowa still didn't bother locking their doors back then. They probably just, everybody's good. Crime is not non-existent, but it's low.
Yes.
People are a little more spread out, not so compacted. So the pace of life is good. People are maybe calmer, more relaxed, happier. There's just a lot of things. I think if you have a young family that you look at and you say, it's not at the top of your list when you start looking at places to relocate, but when you go through everything, you're saying, yeah, we got to consider this place, Yeah,
well, there's no question. And, I think, let's see, Connor was, the first year I was here, he was in sixth grade. Patrick was in fourth grade. Marit was in second grade. And Jack was 3. And I can't imagine a better childhood that they could have had. The 3 boys are all incredible athletes. They had great success both on the AAU circuit, in middle school, and on the high school level. My daughter was a terrific athlete also in high school. She has chosen not to do that at the collegiate level. Incredible student. So they had friends. They had plenty to do. They loved where they went to high school. Iowa City West. Connor won 2 state championships. Patrick won 1. If they didn't win it, they were in the finals typically. They'll probably end up in the history of that program, 3 in the top 4 or 3 in the top 5 in scoring, playing for the same coach. It was a Iowa legend, Steve Bergman. So, I wouldn't trade it. It wasn't like I was looking to move from here. Like, this is a destination job. It's not really a stepping stone job. Others have done, and Lute Olson did it, right?
Right.
And I actually played golf with him on the Nike trip, and there were times when he said, I wondered if I should ever leave this place because it was that special to he and his wife. Now, clearly, he did okay when he got to Arizona.
He didn't have to be
on his way to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and he didn't have to be a snowbird anymore. He had all the sun he could handle year-round in Tucson.
And more. Exactly.
So there's a few fun things I wanted to bring up. Okay. As a player, you started out at Wake Forest. Now, we're not talking about the Stone Age or the Mesozoic, but that was a different era. So how did a kid from Philly wind up a Demon Deacon?
Well, it's interesting. You think about the ACC now. When I went to Wake Forest, we had 7 teams in the conference. So you had Tobacco Road, the 4 there, and then you had Maryland, Virginia, and Clemson. That's it. So it was a big deal. And they had their own TV network back in those days, which is, it's not like it is now. So I'll never forget, they were recruiting me, and my brother and I are in our bedroom that we shared in a row house in Philadelphia, watching a 12-inch black and white TV. And you turn the TV on, and there's Wake Forest, North Carolina on a Tuesday night. And it was absolutely insane, the atmosphere. And I'm like, you know what? This is pretty cool because, in Philadelphia, you wanted to play in the Big Five.
Right. I was going to say, you must have had some local schools recruiting you.
Yeah, you had, they all offered.
Okay.
Villanova,
And Philly kids are notorious. They have been, and they still pretty much are, for wanting to stay home.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a little bit more now. There was a time there where St. Joe's, Temple, and LaSalle were really loaded with Philly kids. And there's enough to go around. Some went to Villanova. Rowley was a little more national. When the Big East kind of took over TV in the 80s, he was recruiting national. Jay Wright really started locking into making sure anybody that was really good, they went right there. And Penn was always a little bit more national because it's in the Ivy League. And, when I decided to transfer from Wake, I made a decision. I didn't want to give up anything athletically, but I really made that decision for my love for Coach Weinhauer, but also for academic reasons. And again, to be honest with you, Dave, I did not expect at that point that I was going to be in basketball as a coach. I went to the University of Pennsylvania and graduated from the Wharton School, expecting to work on Wall Street or something along those lines. But when my career came to a halt and it was obvious I was not going to play in the NBA, that's when I didn't want to give up on the game. And I was very lucky that Craig Littlepage and Tom Schneider helped me get that first job up.
Hold that thought. Let's take a quick break. We need to take another short commercial break, and then the Captain's Table will be back with head coach Fran McCaffery of the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Ready to make your brand stand out? At Amplify AI Media, we combine the power of artificial intelligence with creative expertise to elevate your marketing strategy. Our AI-driven approach ensures that every decision is data-backed, every campaign is targeted, and every result is impactful. We amplify your brand's voice louder and clearer than ever before. Amplify AI Media, where innovation meets precision. Visit amplifymedia.ai. Why settle for ordinary when extraordinary is within reach?
This is David Benezra, and I've been chatting with Iowa head coach Fran McCaffery, and we were just touching on his basketball career as a player, where he transferred to Penn. Before we get too far there, now, you're 1 year at Wake, and you would know this history better than I. I read that Wake beat Carolina twice. I'm guessing that something may never have happened prior or since would be my guess. Obviously, I could be wrong with that, but that's an incredible feat. You were part of that.
Yeah. And well, what's interesting about that, again, so I make the decision to leave Philly and go down there. So we played, this was really just the early stages of cable television. There was no Dish Network or anything like that or streaming. So we actually played North Carolina as the television game preceding the Super Bowl that year. So that's how big it was. And we lost. We were down 1, and Al Wood blocked Leroy McDonald's shot at the buzzer. I thought it was going in. He came and got a piece of it.
I remember Al Wood, 6'6" athlete, yeah.
Yeah, we lost by 1. And we beat them pretty handily at home, and we beat them in the semifinals of the conference tournament. How crazy is this, Dave? We beat Carolina twice. We beat Duke. We had 19 wins. We lost in the conference final and didn't go to either the NCAA tournament or the NIT.
My God.
Because the NCAA only took the regular season champion, who was Carolina, and the tournament champion, which was Duke. And so we had 3 wins against those guys. But then also, we'd beaten Virginia two out of 3 times.
But how could you not get an NIT bid?
Yeah, they took them and NC State. At least NC State beat us 2 out of 3. We beat them once, but we beat Virginia 2 out of 3, and they took them for the NIT. So it was a different time. Plus, the NCAA tournament didn't have 64 teams, and so it was a fabulous experience for me. Now, keep in mind, this was 1977, 78. And in the summer of 76, the United States won the Olympic gold medal in Montreal. The starting point guard on the Olympic team, gold medal winning team, was Phil Ford. So when we played on Super Bowl Sunday, I was guarding him and he was guarding me. So we actually drove from Philadelphia to the Olympics, our family did, and watched that team play in Montreal. So that was like my junior year in high school. And all of a sudden, a year later, I'm guarding the guy on Super Bowl Sunday. So that was a pretty incredible journey there.
Now, transferring to Penn, you had to have a lot of support because you're leaving the ACC at what I would say was just about its zenith for non-scholarship, even though as a basketball program, Penn and usually Princeton were dominant of the Ivy at that time. So, that had to be the whole family deciding, yeah, we can do this. Let's do it. This is a great move. Our son is back home. He's a bright guy. He's going to go to Penn. He'll, like you said, you wanted to work on Wall Street, so you're going to go to Wharton School of Finance. Now, was that a difficult decision to make?
It was actually quite easy because my final schools were Penn, Princeton, and Wake Forest. That was my final three. So ironically, the coach that did most of the recruiting for me was Bob Weinhauer. Chuck Daly was the head coach. So my freshman year at Wake, he left to go work for Billy Cunningham for the Philadelphia 76ers. Coach Weinhauer was promoted. So when I made the decision I was going to leave Wake, I felt really comfortable with Coach Weinhauer. And I wanted to come back to Philly. And again, I wasn't losing anything athletically. If you remember, my first year at Penn, now I had to sit out because that's how it worked in those days. We went to the Final Four, so it was Penn, Michigan State, Indiana State, and DePaul. So that's how good we were. So not only was I not losing anything athletically, and not to take anything away from Wake Forest academically, because it's a fabulous academic institution. And I really enjoyed that, going to school there. It's not in the Ivy League. It's not the Wharton School, the number one business school in the country, maybe one of the top two in the world. And I get to play in the Palestra. I get to practice in the Palestra every day. So it was truly a tremendous opportunity, and I'm very thankful to have made that decision.
Now, you were a pretty good player. I read as a senior at Penn, you led the team in steals and assists, and you were named most inspirational player. And then also, your position was point guard, which makes absolute sense to me, period. But your nicknames were interesting: White Magic and Conductor. Now, being a Philly guy, I'm going to assume that when there was no organized basketball, you were playing pickup 24/7 all over the city against all sorts of guys. And, probably in a way, not to denigrate your high school coach in any way, probably learned so much out there back in the day when there was what I call good pickup, real pickup being played. Why were you called White Magic? Were you surprisingly quick to people for a white kid that was running the point, or had some flash, a little fanciness to your game?
Well, this answer is going to be a little bit longer than maybe you're interested in hearing, but I grew up in the city. All right. So we literally played in a schoolyard. You've heard schoolyard basketball. There's a yard next to a school where the kids would have recess, and there was 2 baskets, and that's where we would play. The neighborhood I grew up in was what they called a changing neighborhood in those days. So it went from being predominantly white to predominantly black. So the guys I was hooping with were all black. And so I played that kind of way, that style. And then I attended, my parents wanted me to go to Catholic school. So I attended a Catholic school not far from where we lived. And we had a pretty good team. We had a really good athletic program there. And so we played a game. I might have been in 3rd grade, 4th grade, something like that. And there was a guy coaching the other team, and I think you probably even know him. His name was Sam Rhines. He was Kobe's coach. You know Sam.
Sure.
And so Sam was coaching the other team, and he come up to me after the game and said, "Man, you're really good." And he called my father and said, "Hey, I'm taking a team down to North Philly for this citywide tournament." So, North Philly is a lot of great players have come out of North Philly. Again, it's a black neighborhood, and we're down there playing.
Temple's in North Philly, right?
Temple's in North Philly.
Yeah.
So Sam Rhines became my mentor. So, and again, not to denigrate my high school coach, who was a good guy, Mike Osborne, good coach. But when it came to developing and decision making, I leaned towards Sam Rhines because he was my mentor from third grade on. So, all right, so now I get to where I'm like in eighth, ninth grade, and he says, all right, he said, now we're going to really test how good you are. So this might have been in seventh grade. He said, you're going to try out for the Philadelphia, New York team. So there was a Philadelphia all-star team that would play against New York, and it was primarily in the black community in both cities. There had never been a white player who made a roster. I don't know how many even tried out. So he takes me to a tryout. There's 250 kids trying out. They cut it to 40, and we trained to play 2 games. We practiced 3 hours a day for like 4 weeks, and I made the team. And from there, he said, okay, now you got to graduate to the Sunny Hill League. So he took me down to the Sunny Hill League. He said, now you're really going to get outplayed here, but it's what you need to do. So I started playing in the Sunny Hill League, and I did that from ninth grade on. And there was a black sports writer by the name of Julius Thompson, and we had, and you'll remember this name, Lewis Lloyd was one of the greatest players ever to come out of Philadelphia. Played for the Houston Rockets in '86 NBA Finals, and Lewis was Black Magic. And so this was the early stages, David, of AAU. So we would take the top players in our class and we would go play people. And so then because of the way that I played, throwing behind the back passes and dribbling behind my back and no look alley-oop passes and things like that, Julius Thompson gave me the nickname of White Magic. So now we have Black Magic and we have White Magic. Okay. And my wife, you'll appreciate this. My wife gets the biggest kick out of it because if I'm at the Final Four or I'm on the road in AAU and I see guys from Philly, they don't call me Fran. They call me Magic. Hey, Magic, and she gets the biggest kick. And so do my kids. So
I like that.
It was quite a run we had. Gene Banks and Lewis Lloyd, Jeffrey Clark, Larry Gainey. We had a really talented group. And this is the truth, Dave. We never lost. So we were together for like 3 years. And we would go various places. We would win the Philadelphia, New York game. Albert King was on the New York team. We beat them. And we actually won the Dapper Dams because the bulk of us, myself, Gene, Joe Garrett, Jeffrey Clark. Now we had some guys from Pittsburgh. We actually beat the United States in the Dapper Dan.
Wasn't Gene Banks, I want to say, known as Tinkerbell?
He was Tinkerbell.
And
guess what?
Yeah, go ahead.
He was the number 1 player in America. Magic Johnson was 2. Gene was 1. That's how good he was.
I'd like to know the history behind that. Where does the Tinkerbell nickname come from?
He used to run on his tiptoes.
So
I don't know, if it looked like a ballerina or whatever.
Run silent, run deadly type of a thing, because he was a big, strong guy. Yeah.
And he never got tired.
That was actually, he went to Duke. That was a big-time Duke squad playing for, it was on the tip of my tongue, the coach before Coach K, who was successful there, which now nobody basically remembers. But
Bill Foster.
Yeah.
It was Bill Foster.
Yeah.
And there was 2 Bill Fosters coaching in the league at the time. Bill Foster was at Clemson and Bill Foster was at Duke.
Yeah. So you graduated with a degree from Wharton, along with getting a master's in education, with this plan to go to Wall Street. So you're too bright to be coaching basketball. What the heck are you doing coaching basketball?
I've often wondered that, but David, I'm a lifer, you're a lifer. You love the game, you appreciate the game, you respect the game. And so it was an opportunity for me to stay involved. And what was interesting in those days, when Craig Littlepage hired me, I was the 3rd assistant. It was a volunteer position. I had to get a part-time job, but we also, in those days, had JV teams. They called them sub-varsity teams. So I was an assistant on the varsity. I would sit on the bench and things, but I was the head coach of the sub-varsity team that we would travel around and we would play junior colleges, branch campuses, things like that. So now you're running practice by yourself. You're driving the band. You're the only coach on the bench. Every time out, you got to decide what you're saying. You got to put your offense in. And I did that for 3 years, 1 at Penn and 2 at Lehigh.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
We are going to take another break, a quick break, and then the Captain's Table will be back again with head coach Fran McCaffery of the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Are you confused about Medicare? Center for Healthcare Rights is here to help. The Health Insurance Counseling and Advocacy Program, or HICAP, offers LA County residents free, unbiased information to guide you through Medicare options, enrollment, and benefits. To schedule your free counseling session, call us at 1-800-434-0222. That's 1-800-434-0222, or visit healthcarerights.org. Center for Healthcare Rights. We help people navigate Medicare.
Are you interested in financial, technology, or science topics? How about underreported issues? If so, check out the news media outlet, UCAS News and UCAS Studios. That's www.ucasstudios.com.
This is David Benezra. I'm back with Iowa head coach Fran McCaffery, and we're not talking about coaching. We're talking about playing days and other players. I have to interject something. We spent some time together one summer at the ABCD camp. You were out there, scouting, recruiting players, and I was out there evaluating. And there was some time in between because a lot of the coaches were leaving the camp to go watch Jason Williams, who would wind up at Duke, go play somewhere. So you said, hey, are you hungry? You want to go grab something? I said, sure. So that was my introduction to one of the great, because I think there are two, and you took me to one of the great Philly cheesesteaks in Philly. And what that leads me to asking, though, is, my God, if it was me, that would have really entered into my decision about Iowa. I mean, where do you find Philly cheesesteaks, great Philly cheesesteaks in the state of Iowa?
Well, you're going to laugh at this because a guy opened up a cheesesteak place, and they were fabulous, but he went out of business.
Oh, my God. Well, he probably should have called it Hawkeye cheesesteaks or something like that,
And then I actually had my radio show was at Applebee's, and they were doing a fundraising event at Applebee's, and they called it the Franwich, and it was basically a cheesesteak. And then they had the Hoiberger, because Fred Hoiberg was coaching at...
I never knew that, the Hoiberger. Okay.
So it was the Franwich and the Hoiberger. We raised quite a bit of money for Coaches versus Cancer. So there's plenty of really good places to eat here, but you actually can... There's a cheesesteak place at the mall. There's a food court there, so you can get a chicken cheesesteak or a meat cheesesteak. Actually pretty good. I'll take you there.
Yeah, that speaks to one of two things. Either the town is small enough, you can just stumble into it, or you were on the hunt for a cheesesteak. You were deep down, maybe even subconsciously, so needy for a cheesesteak that, somehow you found this place. Either way, good to hear it's a good one.
Yep.
Briefly, I didn't know that you have a brother who I guess is a sports writer back east.
Correct. He's older and a very popular guy and is a columnist. I mean, he has covered, you name it, the Super Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Final Four, the NBA Finals, the World Series, the Stanley Cup Finals. And the thing that I always appreciated about him, when you work for a newspaper, one day he's talking to Donovan McNabb after the Super Bowl, and maybe on Monday he's covering a girls' field hockey game at the high school level, and always treated all of those athletes with tremendous respect either way. So we grew up going to games with my dad and my mom, and so we both were fortunate enough to stay in the business because he was the president of the Philadelphia Sports Writers for a number of years. He had the column of the year in Pennsylvania a number of times. Wasn't afraid to take a stand, but was not one of those negative guys that's running around trying to pick on something or write an article that's going to get or stir controversy. Was also on radio for a number of years.
Yeah, I kind of miss that about the old style sports reporting. It seems like everything is different now. It's like, can you just really tell me about the game or the player without getting into all this other stuff? It's
even more important, Dave, when you think about it, because nobody buys the paper for the scores. You're buying it for the columns, for opinion as they evaluate the Phillies and their ability to go to the playoffs, or the Sixers, and what's going on with Embiid, things like that. That's why people, when they do buy the paper or they click on articles, that's what they want to see.
Listen, I have a question for you, but it's a sort of a convoluted thing. I'm going to get to a question.
Okay.
And I didn't know how to change it up, so I'm just going to say, I'm going to start with this. Regarding style of play, apparently your up-tempo style of play, which I don't see why it wouldn't be, is a favorite among your players, and Iowa led the Big Ten in scoring in 5 straight seasons before finishing second last year. You were 5th nationally in 21 and 22, and that was when you averaged more than 83 points in consecutive seasons for the first time in 27 years. And I have a quote from John McLeod about you. The number one thing about Fran is that he has a great feel for the game and he understands players. Fran has a great knack for setting an offense and he is a great defensive coach. He has great relationships with his players. This is a great fit for Iowa and a great fit for Fran. So first off, who would you say has influenced you the most as far as offensive coaching / philosophy? And how, if any, has your offensive philosophy changed over the years because you were from a different era? How has your offensive philosophy evolved? Let's put it that way.
Well, I've been pretty lucky. When I got to Wake Forest, we ran. We went to the Final Four at Penn, running Coach Weinhauer's break. When I got to Notre Dame, we ran. We ran when I was at Lehigh. Coach McLeod wanted to run. So my mentors were up-tempo philosophically. I come across to you as a guy who played defense, and I did. I was a really good defensive player, really active, stealing the ball, doubling the post, rebounding my position. I wasn't a great shooter, so I had to impact the game, loading up my teammates who were really good offensive players, but also affecting the game defensively. My philosophy is more offensive-oriented than defensive-oriented. It has been. At times I'm criticized for it. We try to dig in and get stops when we need them, but we're going to be in a high possession game. We're going to try to attack the defense before they're set. We don't want to go against a stacked defense every time down and have to call a set and have to run a series of picking action, especially with the 30-second shot clock.
Besides that, which makes all sense, would you say that how the game has developed since the beginning of the three-point line also affects that in the sense of, not that you're trying to do this, but it's almost more like how many stops can we get versus we need more possessions because, we have a better chance of outscoring them the way we play. And like you said, when we need to dig down, it's like, hey guys, you know what? It's time. We got to dig deep now and get a stop or two. But basically, we're going to run, we're going to push, we're going to move off the ball, we're going to attack them before they're really set, bust their rotations, and, here we go.
My philosophy is you build confidence with your guys, and you encourage them, empower them to trust their talent, think for themselves, and make plays. So they're not out there to please me. Is coach going to get mad if I miss this shot? Is coach going to get mad if I drive the ball and when maybe he thought I should have fed the post? So we're only going to be the best version of ourselves if our guys play the game with supreme confidence. And I tell that to recruits, and I tell that to our guys all the time. So my feeling is you gain confidence with your ability to make plays. Make plays for yourself, make plays for your teammates, make plays that are winning plays, and then also have enough mental toughness and understanding of the game. Let's say you come down and you kick it off your foot or you turn it over. Run back and dig in. Limit them to one shot. Rebound the ball. Make sure it's one contested shot. But I'm very proud. A lot of people don't know this, but you pointed out some statistics about where we finished in the league, where we finished nationally. If you lead the nation in a category, a particular statistical category, you get an award from the NCAA. And we led the nation in assist turnover ratio a couple of years ago. So we're first in the league in scoring. We're in the top 5 in scoring, but we're not turning it over. And my son Connor led the nation in assist turnover ratio twice. And the other time he led the Big Ten. He's second in the history of Division I basketball in assist turnover ratio.
Chip off the old block. Let me interject real quick and put you on the spot.
Okay.
So, who's the better athlete? you or one of your sons? And then who was the better player, you or one of your sons?
Well, the best player might have been my wife. She was an All-American.
Okay.
Well, what's interesting, David, and it's a great question because all three of them are really good players. They're all different. Connor played point guard in high school exclusively. For us, he played 1, 2, 3, 4, and sometimes 5 at 6'6", 215. Smart and tough. Patrick is 6'9", thin, more fluid, 1,000-point scorer in the Big Ten. And then my son Jack is 6'9". He's a little more a combination of both. He really handles it and passes it well for a 6'9" guy. Has great footwork in the post. 215, 220 as a senior in high school. Patrick, when he was a senior in high school, he was 6'9", never played a possession in high school above 180. Now he's 215. So they're all different, but they're all special in their own way, and they're all committed to winning and all have played on incredibly successful teams. Connor, the all-time winningest player, along with Jordan Bohannon at Iowa, 111 wins. Patrick won 106 games, and Jack is winning a lot at his high school, Iowa City West.
I have to know, when you won your 500th game, did you at least throw a bounce pass in honor of Dr. Tom Davis? And also, if the Hawkeyes, I'm sure they honored you with some achievement, but they really should at least call you primary care doctor, Fran McCaffery, for that. I did see a really nice photo of you and Connor at the end of that game. So although I know that you're coaching to win, you're not coaching for other reasons, period, that was a little emotional for you to have your son there on the team and you win the 500th game and everything. It looked like just a really nice moment in time.
I'll tell you what, it was. You're 100% right. I appreciate you bringing that up. But also, probably the best moment was when we won the Big Ten Tournament Championship a couple of years ago, and they both were on the team and hugged them both and shed some tears together. It's an incredible journey, like you talked about earlier, Dave. We pick them up and bring them out here. Patrick was mad. He was upset. Connor didn't want to get on the plane to come out here. And next thing you know, seemingly a minute later, we're cutting the nets down in Indianapolis. What a special moment. And then, of course, my wife and daughter came out as well, and my son Jack. We all celebrated together. So it's been an incredible journey, and appreciate the opportunity to talk about it with you.
Well, Fran, I can't believe that we're out of time because actually there were other things I wanted to get to. But it was great having you on the captain's table. And on top of that, I enjoyed getting an uninterrupted hour of your time, as there is nothing more precious to a college coach than that. So I feel honored that you would take the time to do it with me and with us. Thank you very much. This is your host, David Benezra, and that concludes this podcast of The Captain's Table. I hope you enjoyed our show today with Iowa men's basketball head coach Fran McCaffery. And you can stream this and all our podcasts on multiple sites on the net. Just look up The Captain's Table, and that's Captain with a K. Again, The Captain's Table. We are all over the net, and you can stream it on multiple sites. Thank you.